Welcome to Customer Love Stories, a podcast where we investigate why certain brands are loved or not loved by their customers. I'm your host, Robi Ganguly, CEO and co-founder of Apptentive. For those of you who don't know, Apptentive is a Seattle-based voice of the customer solution that allows some of the world's most beloved brands to capture invaluable feedback across the mobile customer journey and take immediate action to win back customers and activate fans at scale. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today to talk to Jason Pace, Senior Architect at Alkami Technologies, a longtime Apptentive customer who has helped us make our solution better. We've been working together for multiple years. Jason, it's awesome to have you on board to talk about things that you love and why. Could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. So, name is Jason Pace. Like Robi said, I am a senior architect at Alkami Technologies. We are a digital banking, kind of a white label company. We do online banking apps and websites for about 200 credit unions and banks across the country. Kind of building out their digital presence for online banking, what you would do with your Bank of America or Chase apps for kind of the smaller guys. So, been doing that for the last 9 years in a variety of roles, from kind of how I first got engaged with Apptentive here on the product side, looking for solutions around app ratings and customer feedback, and then kind of done the full gamut of engineering and product. Current role as an architect over at Alkami, kind of architecting our next generation mobile banking apps, building things in Flutter. So good to be here.
Awesome to have you. Awesome to have you. You've been a great partner, and you've seen the organization go from small to IPO. So it's a tremendous journey along the way. You guys have been really successful. So let's get started with the question I like to ask everybody. Who or what are you a fan of?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so obviously a variety of things, but I would say my weekend fandom for sure certainly falls along with Texas Longhorns, particularly football, but really anything Longhorns. But yeah, definitely in the fall, I look forward to Longhorn football religiously every Saturday and the tailgating and everything that goes with it.
And how did that come about? How did you become a Texas Longhorns fan? Like I know that in Texas, sports is a big deal. Football in particular is a huge deal. But how did you become a Longhorns fan?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say somewhat born and bred. My parents were fans, but not alumni of Texas or anything. So it didn't come from a multi-generation born to go there kind of thing. Grew up obviously a football fan, and really, my dad was watching the games on the weekend, and that just kind of slowly became my team. I think on the NFL, I kind of waffled around. I had parents that were Saints fans out of New Orleans, and obviously Cowboy fans around here. And then I picked up helmets I liked. I remember being a Redskins fan and a Bengals fan just because the helmets, and I liked the gear. But the Longhorns were just kind of, I picked them from the get-go. And then, grew up wanting to go to school there and went all the way through, graduated high school and went down there for school. And so obviously, once you get ingrained in the school, even more so, it kind of sticks with you for life. So yeah, really, I don't remember a particular moment that just said, a click moment that says, yeah, the Longhorns are a thing for me. I think it was just kind of, I grew up with it, and I don't ever remember not being one.
That is really interesting, because I was going to assume that you went to school, right? But yeah, it's actually more that your parents were fans and they didn't go to the school. So that Saturday tradition, it reminds me of a previous episode we did with Bill Pierce, and he was talking about being a Marvel Comics fan, and he was talking about watching the cartoons with his kids, sitting down on like Saturday mornings. So your parents are sitting down with you Saturday, getting ready. Tell me a little bit more about that tradition on Saturdays with you and your dad, in particular, like watching games. What was that like?
Yeah. I mean, it was. I have to think of the way back machine a little bit, but I can remember. I guess Texas being one of the larger schools kind of seemed to draw the TV times that were ideal. So a lot of 7 in the evening games here in the Central Time Zone, or 2:30 in the afternoon. So both went really well. Either having a big lunch and then sitting down and watching the game, or cooking around the game. So I can remember being out with my dad, cooking something on the smoker for the day if we were doing a night game. So I kind of more than the football even kind of just remember I'm hanging out with dad. So we're doing several hours, and we might be throwing the ball around in the yard or something like that. So really, I guess those memories from early on stick out a little bit more to me than the games themselves. But I just always remember it being like a family gathering type thing. So it was just time to spend, with the parents. I'm probably not the teenager years. I don't remember it that way, but in the early childhood years, just more. It was time to spend, and I can remember the meals, and we were really close with grandparents and cousins. Came from a pretty good sized family, so a lot of times that was the time where there were 10 or 15 people at the house, or we were at my grandparents' house watching the game because my grandpa was a fan as well. So I think the early memories are more family oriented than football oriented, from the start there.
Makes sense, right? Because then, like, I think what I'm hearing you say is, while there probably were some memorable games and some memorable players, and we can get into that a little bit, it was the dedication of the time around it. It was like this thing you could count on. Come fall, it's like we're gonna be with family. We're gonna have some good food. We're gonna be out throwing the football around. Like, so there's this carve out in creating your fandom that was associated with things not just about like the team or the sport, but about like the quality of the community with your family that you had together. And
for sure,
that tradition, as it grew for you, did you start to bring other people into it? Like, do you have siblings? Did you have friends that you started to like have come over? Like, how did that kind of community evolve and change as you were growing up?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So had certain friends that were fans, and then also had, like you said earlier, football is a big sport down here in Texas. So lots of rivalries. So us with Oklahoma, and then with A&M back in those days before they moved over to the SEC. So it even became friends of ours that were fans of the others. So we'd get together on those games when we were, it was more of an opposition thing, but fun around it. So as a kid, yeah, I mean, certainly those kind of interactions. I guess the most kind of special to me now being a dad. So my kid, or I have two kids, but my oldest is 10 now, and he took right to it. I guess very similar to me, just kind of following dad. So we'll drive down to Austin and go to games some now, or he's religiously wearing his gear and ask me what time the games are on Saturday, and we'll get up and do a lot of the same thing. We'll cook or hang out in the yard or whatever. To kind of get ready for the game. So I guess seeing like a second generation of that is probably the most special side of it for me. But yeah, definitely as kids, we'd bring in, like I mentioned, family members that were also fans. But as you got a little bit older and figured out, which friends, especially in high school, which friends were going where, or looking at what colleges, some of that kind of more the rivalry nature came together. So as we were not so much looking to hang out with our parents anymore on a Saturday afternoon or evening, and we were getting together with friends, it became more of a place to kind of, I guess, get after each other a little bit from a who's going to win tonight or that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm pretty curious about, because you didn't grow up in the Austin area and your parents didn't go to school. So there's almost like there's a conscious selection of who you're going to root for. You're saying, at least in Texas, there's A&M and there's UT Austin Longhorns, right? Were there other like schools, things you could have chosen to be fans of that were like, as you were starting to grow up, you had to like reinforce that identity?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mostly remember always sticking with them. There was a point, you start looking at schools and what you want to do, and I started out school as an electrical engineering major. Quickly kind of flipped over into the computer science world. But I can remember at that time when engineering and things like that were of interest to me, kind of looking around. And Texas is a great engineering school, but certainly, they're known more on the business side and law and things like that. So you kind of start to think, well, is there a better engineering school out there? And A&M is actually a really good engineering school too. So I do remember a time where I was like, I should look at A&M. Didn't actually do any campus visits or anything like that, but started to just kind of, I'd say fandom probably didn't break, but did start to consider like, well, I don't know if that's the best place for me to go to school or not. Or, there's obviously the admissions process. Texas, I don't know how most states are, but Texas does they have the top 10% are allowed in any public university in the state, but then the universities themselves have to control enrollment. And so back then, and it's probably still the case, but Texas was at 60,000 enrollment. They were having a really hard time kind of controlling the number of people and their ability to educate that size of a group. So that was in play too, obviously, will I get accepted and things like that. So I'd say if anything, not necessarily my fandom of, probably sports teams and all that, but from the university perspective, certainly that period in high school where you make some different considerations and whether or not that's where you'll end up or not. And actually, even I guess probably a better way, I didn't graduate from Texas. I ended up graduating at the University of North Texas up here, just north of Dallas. So down there, kind of went through that transition of, hey, I'm a freshman in a place with 60,000 students. So my schedule is an 8 a.m. class, followed by a 12 o'clock class, followed by a 4 o'clock class. And we weren't really of the means of, just, money flowing everywhere where I could just take off and go to school. So I had a hard time, keeping a part-time job or anything like that with my crazy schedule. And, freshman got last pick on school and stuff. So I really, after my freshman year, it just wasn't working. Grades wise and all that was great, but it just wasn't financially working great. So at that point in time, I had to make a decision to kind of leave the school I loved behind and still remain a fan there. I went to University of North Texas, which isn't known for much in athletics. So got my degree there, loved the school, loved the place, but my fandom stayed with UT, and that's all my kids know today. They never asked me any questions about where I graduated. They only talk about Texas. So I guess it's interesting in that respect that athletic fandom kind of stuck with me, even though I physically, moved around a little bit and didn't ultimately graduate down there.
That really, I think that's super insightful and interesting. I'm very curious about, so you're growing up and you're thinking about engineering, and so Texas A&M has more of that reputation, but you've got that draw to the Longhorns, and then you get there and you're like, well, facing facts, this is not working as well for me as I hoped it would. And so that fandom, it's important, but it can't trump the sort of realities of my life. I'm going to change it, but I'm still going to stick with that loyalty. So, were there times where you thought about switching loyalties? Was that ever in your mind, or you started to kind of feel yourself draw away?
I guess from what I tie the most, the football side, no. I mean, I never, it never crossed my mind a single time. And I guess that's where that brand loyalty really comes in, as instilled in you. Like I said, obviously the education side and other things, just trying to think in the future. I can imagine my kids go somewhere else. I think that would be the one thing that could pull me away for a few years. If my kid goes to, and not even to play sports, but whatever, obviously, the family side, and, we're going to go spend Saturdays down there at wherever he's at school and going to those games. I can see, I don't think it'll ultimately, I'll be back, or I'll be there on the side if I need to be, but that's really the only thing I can imagine that would, outside of something, just social disaster, or the school takes some stance that I, just principally can't align with, or something like that, something you wouldn't anticipate. But things like that, obviously you're not loyal to just running wild and not representing society well or anything like that. But just from what I see on a day-to-day basis, yeah, I can't imagine, aside from family and kids kind of pulling me away for a little bit. I never really wavered on, I was going to school at North Texas and driving down to Austin for games on Saturdays. So yeah, definitely in my experience, didn't pull away at all.
Yeah. And so you were still going back down to the games on Saturdays. You're into it that much. What do you like as a fan? What do you like as a Texas fan? Is it important to be there in person? Is it I have to make sure that my Saturday, I've got time to watch this? What's that like for you? What's your mental set of commitments?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's some degree of Texas is somewhat like the Cowboys, being a fan of the football. There's most people either really like them or have an aversion to them of sorts. So there's a little bit of just that fun rivalry, competitiveness. I'm not played sports recreationally growing up, but I've never been in a role or anything to be able to be that level of competitiveness. So you kind of get that competitive drive, I guess, secondhand watching games, and especially if you've got friends that are with the other teams, and just I don't know, I enjoy the competition. And again, I always enjoyed the camaraderie of it too. So I mean, like you and I have talked on the smoking barbecue and stuff like that. I mean, and all that. Nothing makes me happier than realizing it's a 7:30 game, so I've got 7 or 8 hours of pregame to have a few drinks with friends or family, and cook on the grill. And especially that fall weather in Texas, when we get our break from the heat, the October, November, where it's a nice 70 degrees around the clock. It's just great to be outside, and I think more than anything, it just kind of shuts the brain down from everything else. You're always thinking about work or projects or something with the kids. So it's really just kind of that. It's always, even when it was school, you forgot about school or forgot about not having any money in college or whatever it was. It was just that time just to just kind of turn focus to something else, purely for enjoyment, and kind of let your worries go a little bit. So it's just something I look forward to every week more than anything, just for that, or those reasons, I guess.
That's awesome. So I think what I'm hearing you say is that there's an aspect of your fandom, and that's a sweet Texas Longhorn Yeti cup right there. But
yes,
that burnt orange is so distinctive. It's amazing.
Yes.
But I think what I'm picking up on is the aspect of one of the things you appreciate about being a fan of the Longhorns is there's this escape, right? It's like for that Saturday, you got the time to get into a place you want to be that you're not always at, right? It's quality time with people. It's making some food for people you care about. It's getting to have that kind of sheltered space that you look forward to, which is when you said, hey, I love it when it's like a 7:30 game, because it gives me this whole space leading up to it. It's almost like it allows me to expand that. So I think what I'm hearing is one of the things for you about being a fan is that carve out, whether it was family time when you were a kid and you were coming up and your family is watching and people are coming over, or now you can carve it out and you can make it this place that is full of enjoyment, escape from some of the average day-to-day of the work, and like something that really like you get to create, right? That you get to, whether it's food or it's an experience for your friends. What's the craziest thing you've ever done as a fan?
Oh my gosh. Probably wildest game experience I had as a freshman down there. I hung out with the guys that take care of Evo, the mascot, pregame, and they were actually doing their fraternity ritual stuff, the welcoming and things of that sort, where everyone was having to drink their beers out of a cowboy hat upside down. So they were filling cowboy hats and turning them up, drinking that. That was probably the wildest. That one as a pregame, and then Texas's largest rival by far is Oklahoma, and it's a unique game if you're not familiar, where they meet in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl every year, and the stadium is half crimson and half orange. So it's always game of the year. It's the second Saturday in October. It's during the state fair. So I remember being down there with some buddies in college, and it was 7:00 in the morning, and we were eating McDonald's sausage biscuits with a beer to start the day. And I just remember thinking, it's never good when you're having a beer with breakfast, whether you're winding down a previously long night or starting a morning by all means. But yeah, those two probably are probably the craziest. And then when Texas has won one national championship in my lifetime in football, and that was 2005. So 16 years ago. So at that time I was either finishing college or I think I was right out of college. But yeah, we had just a massive blowout party for the national championship. And I can just remember we scored with 30 seconds to go to beat USC. And I just remember like people jumping in the air and falling on the ground, and my dog was going crazy. Those three are probably the wildest. The national championship has a special place, and that was a pretty great party. But it was at home too. So yeah, on the road, it was probably that OU game with the breakfast and beer, or down there drinking out of cowboy hats with the guys that tend to Bevo all day.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the championship. So that was Vince Young, right? It was quarterback.
Yes. Yep.
Right. So like, how much does your fandom translate from like the team to the players or the coach? Like personalities around it for you.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And yeah, I mean, Vince Young, loved him, just freak athlete, absolutely loved everything about him. He went to the NFL, I think kind of got a bad draw going with Fisher in Tennessee. And I think he was a little ahead of his time. Like his skill set wasn't, today he might've been a lot more successful with just how offenses and things in the NFL are. but obviously kept up with him and rooted for him, but he didn't pan out. That's one example I can remember where I stayed with him. One where I haven't really, and don't necessarily know why, because he seems like a good guy, but Kevin Durant, played 1 year of one and done basketball at Texas. We obviously, I think we only went a round or two deep in the tournament, but I think maybe from I'm probably my favorite athlete of all time is probably Dirk out of Dallas here, and just how humble he is and what a great guy he was for the city and sticking around here for so many years. And I think maybe Durant being his kind of rival there late when he finally won his title at Oklahoma City, probably more so pulling for Dirk than pulling against or rooting against Durant. But yeah, I think just because of I guess maybe trading fandom in that sense. If you were a fan of Kevin Durant at Texas, maybe that is a case where I kind of moved over to, it was in the professional ranks, but to Dirk and Dallas, so it kind of trumped, that fandom there. And even though Dirk's, done, his career's over and Durant's still doing great, I think maybe, I tell myself at least I didn't like the way, I guess Durant didn't stay with Oklahoma City. He went to Golden State to do his, and kind of had that respect for Dirk sticking around and finally getting it done at home, and kind of looked at Durant as well. You got there, but you didn't finish the job, and you said, well, I'll go the quote unquote easy route and go over there with Steph and and Clay and all them and win a title or two in Golden State. So yeah, I wouldn't say I root against him necessarily, but yeah, that probably is an example of one that didn't stick with me after he left there, and one that did. But yeah, for varying degrees, I try to keep up with usually probably the bigger names. I'm not tracking left tackles all the way through their NFL careers or anything like that. But yeah, your stud players like your Vince Youngs and some of the running backs and receivers and stuff that have come out, definitely keep an eye on and always root for them, especially if I'm in a game that's, I don't have any skin in the game or anything. I'll sit back and kind of watch the athletes.
Makes sense. And, I'm on the other side of the Kevin Durant situation, right? Like I'm in Seattle.
Yeah.
I was
the Supersonics.
I was a huge Sonics fan. Of the major sports teams in Seattle, the one that I had the most affinity with growing up was the Sonics. Huge Gary Payton, Sean Kemp, Detlef Schrempf, Sam Perkins. Like these were the guys I was rooting for in the 90s and just really into. It was so fun. We went to the finals against the Bulls. So, fast forward that draft where it was Odom, right? Not Odom.
Yeah.
Odom. And then Durant 1-2, and Portland picked up Odom, and we got Durant 2. And there was new ownership here in Seattle, and there were rumors that they're going to move him. And sure enough, they moved him to Oklahoma, evil Oklahoma, right? Like for both of us, there's this like a little bit of the evil Oklahoma narrative.
Yeah.
And I just was so ticked off, but that first season when he was a rookie, I remember I flew up to Seattle to watch his first rookie game. Right?
Yeah.
I was living in San Francisco at the time, flew up, made an event of it, went with a couple of friends, and I was like, this guy might save basketball in Seattle. Because I had it in my mind, if they had a good enough season, there'd be no way they could move the team. And that was wishful thinking. And then I watched his last game as a Sonic. He actually played against the Warriors in Oakland. So I went to that. I dragged some friends with me. I'm like, hey, this is probably his last game as a Sonic. You go watch it.
Yeah.
And, just an exceptional rookie year, exceptional talent. And when he moved to Oklahoma City, I was always picking up on what he was saying about missing Seattle and feeling for the fans of Seattle. From time to time in interviews, he's made a big point that he doesn't think it's right that Seattle doesn't have a team. His experience was we had great fans and a culture of basketball. And so from that perspective, my fandom of Durant, even as he's moved around, has actually gone stronger because I'm like, this guy knows it. He knows what it's like for us, super, super interesting, right? We're sort of like,
he is a great dude. Yeah, he does seem like a really great dude. And he's always even mentioned growing up and following Dirk himself, because a lot of his game is very similar. So like I said, it's probably easier for me to say rooting for someone else versus rooting against him, because he does seem like a genuinely decent person, or maybe better than decent.
And I think so this is really interesting, right? Like, because as we're talking about this, here's what I'm picking up. There's for you, rivalries are fun, but it's about rooting for, and it's around that creating space around, and it's like that tradition that really like is a piece of your identity and your fandom. And there's a lot of positivity around it. You know, sometimes people are fans because they're against other things, and they're like, well, this helps me root against that. You're not that way. You're like, this helps me root for space and time with my family and my friends, to create meals, to create memories and experiences, to bring my kids along. And that's like so positive. What leads to a brand losing your fandom? What I think you mentioned a little bit, like if the school made some really big changes and you didn't agree with them, that would be one of the ways. But if we switch this out of, you know, let's move away from the Texas Longhorns to maybe brands that you're a fan of, like what happens when they really upset you so that you start to really move away from them, or maybe even get into that negative space?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want to throw names or anything. I'll keep it more generic, but yeah, I mean, I had an experience recently with a purchase where I kind of set it aside. We're doing an addition here at our house and set some stuff aside for it. Didn't open it for 3 months. And then when I did, it was non-functioning, and I couldn't get basically it was past the return policy. No one would take it there. I had conversations and just had a lot of people tell me, yeah, I understand, but sorry, there's nothing we can do. Go to the manufacturer because it has a 1-year warranty. I was like, great. So I go to them and they come back and say, well, it's physical damage, so it voids the warranty. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, yes, I'm just sitting here with something I just opened. So yes, I agree with you, it's physically damaged, but I didn't physically damage it. And ultimately never got to a resolution. And I just told both of them, I said, well, I'm gonna have to go out of my way not to do business with you anymore. But I just, on principle, I'm not going to. Like, I'll wait an extra day for Amazon or whatever I'm gonna do to to get things going, forward in the future. So I think just bad customer service, or just, especially in common sense type scenarios. I know a lot of these people have teenagers or whatever working for them, so it's not I just doing the right things around customers is important to me. So, that's just a specific, example there. But yeah, really just seeing people not treated the right way, probably both from like a customer service perspective. And then, I tend to follow, companies where you have alignment with how they treat people, or, whether it's manufacturing things overseas and how people are treated and paid and things for that, or just, principles of some companies. I know it's been kind of a crazy last several years on the political spectrum and societal, type things. So, if I just have a total misalignment there, then obviously, that's too much for me from an ethics and stuff like that perspective. So I'd say really, ethical and how you treat people when you're talking like consumer brands and things like that are probably the line of delineation for me to do business with someone or something.
I think that makes sense. And I appreciate your politeness, not naming names. When we've had some previous guests, we're talking about poor customer experiences, ways that people have not treated them well. And I think what I'm picking up out of your story is, there's the letter of the law, right? And then there's the spirit. And you're like, all right, I get it. The letter of the law is, I didn't open it up in time, didn't find this out. But the spirit is, I gave you money for something that ultimately isn't satisfying my need.
Right.
And through no fault of my own, it showed up in this condition where it wasn't satisfying my needs. So, like, are you going to honor the spirit? And I think what I'm hearing you say is, when they chose not to, that flips a switch for you. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I get it. Technically, you're right, but it doesn't matter because I can choose to be with people whose spirit is more aligned with my own.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, like, and that's what I told them too. I said, you're obviously you're following your company's policy. I totally get it. I said, but you're even telling me I totally understand, and there's nothing I can do. I was like, well, so be it. I'll just, my next one may not be with someone that can do anything either, but just this experience alone, we'll respectfully move on, and I'm out the money, and it's my problem, but I'll just tell you whether you care or not that I won't be doing business with you anymore. And I think when you tell people that too, and if they're just like, okay, then largely that tells you what you need to know too. Now, again, I try to always take the mindset of, this is probably a 20-year-old kid doing a $10 an hour job in a call center. It's not, this company's headquarters or someone that's a higher up that may even, trump it overall. But, it's, you work with who you're in front of. So they're a representation of the company.
And while you're being polite here, Are you in private with some of your friends more like clear around,
Oh
hey,
yeah.
they didn't do a great job? So what's the cost to a company that loses you as a fan? Are you then like, is there a cycle of negative word of mouth where you're like, hey, be careful, be wary of this?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm noisy. Like I'm not going and blowing up Facebook pages and Google reviews and things like that, just to say don't ever, I see some of those, don't ever buy from these people, they blah blah blah. I'm not that type, but yeah, I'm more of a, if a friend's looking for something, maybe a better example. We had like some when we had our pool put in a few years ago, I used them for a second time. We did one in a different house, and this experience wasn't great. And everyone that asked in our neighborhood about builders for a pool, I go to them and say, well, I've used so and so twice and wouldn't recommend them based on my second experience, and here's why. But I don't go belittle. It's just, here's my experience. You're looking for a positive experience. This is my experience with this one. So, you know, and I always try to word it as I wouldn't use them again because of this, not don't use them because they screwed me over or anything. That's neither here nor there for most people. So I really just try to reflect the experience and my reasoning for why I would or wouldn't recommend someone or some experience based on how it went for me. So yeah, close friends, I'm definitely we may be again on a Saturday sitting around having some drinks, and I may be angry about the experience, a little bit more noisy to your day-to-day friends. But yeah, mostly when it comes out to just neighborhood public and stuff like that, it's more just I had this experience, so I wouldn't recommend so and so for whatever.
Yeah. And like what I'm curious about is ultimately, what fandom does for businesses, how it helps them grow, or it helps, them get more awareness, but also, what it does for the bottom line and how you think about some of the costs when you don't do it really well. And so in this scenario, I'm hearing, there's some places where you don't have to be noisy, but you can be influential and your opinion matters being shared. And especially where it's like big ticket investment items, things where you're really like, hey, this is a big deal. You're going to care about this, and I'm going to share my opinion. I'm going to tell you what it was like for me in your own work, right? As you've built products for people that deal with, one of the most significant things that matters, their money.
Yeah.
How do you think about fandom through that perspective of like, how do you engender fans? What's on your mind around that based upon your own experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I know most recent on the Alkami side, like when we first engaged with you guys, what has it been, 6 or 7 years now? I can't even remember. I mean, that was a very financial based move from our founder at Alkami. I mean, we had, so in the space that we're in digital banking, there's 3 or 4 primary competitors, and they're in on every deal. So everybody's talking to all 4. They're using consultancies to kind of guide them if this one might be the better match for you because they kind of specialize here or there or whatever. But we had a competitor that their very first slide in a sales deck was Alkami's app reviews, and we had built our apps. We had our first few live, and we had credit unions with 200,000 or 300,000 members and 15 reviews, and they were all bad, and they weren't even necessarily app based, as you guys well know, you in particular in experience. So yeah, our founder came to me and he was just like, I can't be losing just because of app reviews. He's like, we got 300,000 people and no one's leaving their feedback on the app store. And we all know why, and you obviously know why. So, I mean, that was our first engagement with you guys, was less around, it was more fix a problem than it was, voice of customer type stuff. But it became that over time, obviously. But the first problem was that, a noisy few was losing Alkami directly business. It was obviously affecting the end credit union or bank too, from someone wanting to download their apps in the store, but it was affecting Alkami direct as a B2B's business. And oh yeah, well, you guys product must suck because your average app score is 2.3 or whatever, and ours is 4.5 or whatever it might have been. So obviously we put an immediate stop to that, working with you guys, and actually, all the ones that follow it, Alkami actually leads in app review averages across our industry now. So it became the biggest thing against us to the biggest thing, one of the biggest things for us, especially as more and more traffic has moved on the mobile digital side over the years. So, obviously that a real valid example from a financial impact where we were losing sales deals over it. But I guess from a product manager, so that was more of a founder and business side. I mean, from a product manager, obviously, I mean, I've always, you ask the people that are using your product if you want to know if it sucks or not. I mean, we can all sit in the room and you and me may think mustard on a hamburger is great, and then we might be the only two in the world and everyone else wants mayonnaise, and if we don't ask anyone else but those of us in the room in the meeting, then we'll go make a decision. I think it's some of the same stuff, around like UX research has picked up so much steam over the last few years, where before it was just, well, we hire 4 designers and this is what they made, and we spent $200,000 building it and no one likes it, versus, hey, let's put 5 or 6 experiences in front of you and in front of random person on the street, or go through our clients and find clients of theirs and get some feedback. And we really kind of engage with that too, and saw just tons of benefit of, when you set your hypothetical and you come back after it's over, like, gosh, I never would have bet they would have picked that. But it was far and away, the 80% or 90% selection of stuff. So yeah, I think just, user feedback, and both in the user research and, once you deliver stuff, continuously getting feedback on it. I think it's really the only way to build products. If you're not doing it that way, then, I mean, hopefully you're a good guesser.
Right. And I think, so I'm picking up a couple things out of that is, one was there's a disconnect between the experience people were having, hundreds of thousands of people using the apps, and the few people who are speaking. And so the impact on the bottom line was, when you don't have representation in the public arena, it can inhibit growth. It can give a perception of quality that may not be accurate. So, the inverse of that is having an active, loyal fan base that evangelizes for you, shifts that perception, allows you to acquire business faster, right? And then generate more, whether it's downloads in the app space or customers in the form of credit unions choosing to work with you. But like that activation of the fans, that's important to growth. And then the second thing is, once you build that muscle, then starting to really like tune it so that you're always thinking that way. Like, hey, what do these people care about? How do we make sure that we're listening to them? How do we continue to iterate in a continuous manner? That aspect is engendering loyalty in like a constant steady stream up and to the right, it seems like, is what I'm hearing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think probably the last piece too is we try not to, we always spoke with, I'm trying to remember the phrase we always use, but basically the silent majority, as the ones that you want that feedback from, but also not being dismissive of the negative comments you are getting. So just because you're only getting negative ones, because you have 100 negative ones and now 10,000 positive ones, doesn't mean the 100 negative ones that you're having, aren't important things or things that you should look at as a product owner. Or you don't want to just say, oh, well, we've drowned out. You don't want to drown out the negative with positivity just to ignore it. You want to, you obviously want that representation from the store perspective and marketing perspective and all that, but also you've got to go dig into those to, what becomes the no longer the majority, but still very, I always almost valued negative feedback more so as a product owner than I did the positive feedback. The positive feedback was more like affirmation and great, we're moving in the right direction, we're doing the right things here, or we hit the mark with something here. But the negative feedback really kind of tells you if it's legitimate and it's constructive. They can really tell you, where you didn't hit the mark or where there's still more work to be done. So I always really valued reading the negative stuff. You just did want to see a lot more positive than negative. So a little bit of a two-edged sword there, I guess. You want to get that positive feedback in there, but yeah, really kind of focus a lot of your efforts on where you're missing the mark.
And I think, the thing I pick up from that, what you're saying, that resonates for me, and I think is a really good lesson, is it's not like a static thing creating a fan, right? It's not a static thing getting loyalty. It's this execution on a regular basis. And so, the thing that you're dipping into and pulling out is, I get more signal from the negative, right? I get more signal from the places we can understand where to improve for me as a product owner, because that allows me to say, well, if I did this, 2 things could happen, right? The first is I might solve a problem that's not just for these people who are saying it, but for a whole slew of other people. And that's awesome. As a product owner, I want to solve problems. I want to make people's lives easier. But then the second thing is, if I solve that problem, I might take somebody who's not feeling great about us and is negative, and I might convert them, right? I might get them to be a fan. And so, like, let's go back to your own experiences. I heard, the pool team did not do a great job working for you twice, and the second time not doing a great job. Has somebody converted you? Have you had an experience where companies like managed to really take a negative experience and turn it into a positive because of how they treated you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of I'm sure I have. Obviously, the first thing that comes to mind converting me is when I go back to food. If I eat a new restaurant, great for the first time, and it's like, oh my gosh, that Tex-Mex or barbecue or whatever, whatever food it is, can certainly convert me and like, oh, you're my new favorite because you outdid my go-to, my Friday night pizza or whatever it is, and now, man, this thing is great. So I've had conversions that way, obviously, a lot of times in life, and that's just kind of the natural, probably competition spirit of business. Businesses are always compete with others, and back to your point of staying relevant and iterating and maintaining the fandom. So that's, I've had plenty of those experiences where you try something for the first time and it's just better than what you knew, and converted there. I'm trying to think of a real example just from I'm sure I can think of it just in the kind of in the cloud here, just conceptually of, I'm sure there's been issues where I, went with someone for a while, they either did me wrong or I was less impressed with them and then went another direction. Obviously, if I were to buy another house and build another pool, that would be a tangible case of that. It would definitely happen. So I'm sure throughout my life, there's probably been plenty, but the most comes to mind there on conversion is really the up and comer, kind of replacing the stalwart that's been there for a period of time, and lots and lots of examples of that.
Right. So for you, and this is what I love about doing this set of interviews. Everybody's different as a fan. Everybody's got sort of different experience, and for you, there's a lot of positivity associated with it, and then there's a lot of room for growth, right? A room for people to switch you away from what you might be used to if they do a really good job. So you're looking, in a bunch of ways for, hey, there's always opportunity for somebody to surprise me. And that's one of the open-minded ways that you approach the world and the way that you're thinking about stuff. And so that, that's hope. That's hope for anybody that's starting a business now. It's hope for people who might be not doing a great job, but if they can continue to iterate and get right, they could show up for you. And you can say, oh yeah, this is awesome. I didn't know that these people were awesome. And now I'm gonna try this out. And so, we're gonna wrap this up talking a little bit about barbecue, right? Talking about, there is in Texas a huge set of loyalties around barbecue. It's not just football, it's barbecue. Oh, yeah. We got Franklin's, we got Salt Lick, we got Lockhart's, we got Lambert's, we got Terry Black's, we got La Barbecue, which I just recently went to for the first time. Do you have one of those that stands out as somebody who kind of showed up on the scene for you and drew your loyalty away, drew some more of your attention and time?
Yeah, I think, obviously in Austin went around and ate a lot of them, and then had a period of life where I couldn't afford a lot of them too, like I described earlier. So didn't eat as much of it as I would love to. But yeah, once I moved up here, obviously I had no loyalty. So in East Texas, there was kind of a few that I grew up in East Texas in Longview. So I had the, it was a smaller community there. So I had the ones that I went to all the time, and then tried around in Austin. And once I got up here, I can remember, we were at a party of some sort and someone just catered it in. And I remember, didn't even know what it was, and just took a bite of brisket or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, where is this from? And, but I still, like I kind of alludes on the food. I'm kind of a picky eater, but for the things I do eat, I like trying new ones. So, I love Tex-Mex, so I love barbecue. So I'll go try, if I hear about a new barbecue place or whatever, I'll go try it. With the kids and stuff, it's a little harder to go get. I'm 30, 40 miles north of Dallas, so I can't necessarily new barbecue place in downtown Dallas. Let me swing down there. I'll try to keep it on my mind and hit it up. But yeah, I'd say it probably, being my psychologist here, I guess it all goes back to the groups of people for me. So we'll be, I'll be in a setting or something, and someone obviously picked the food or they're hosting or whatever, and I try it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's really great, or that's not so great. Where's it? Or I won't be that way, but like, oh, where's this from? And then put that in my mind. Don't eat that again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say probably introduce. I mean, I'll try the random new restaurant on the street. Like my wife's brother, so my brother-in-law owns and runs kind of a one spot restaurant. So definitely kind of seen the struggles of restaurant ownership and all that, and they've done great and have a lot of people that have their real loyal customers and all that. So just I've seen the value of that.
What's that place called? I want to try that next time I'm like near Dallas. What's
Yeah, so they're in the northern suburbs. It's called the Rusty Beagle. So my father-in-law, when he retired, and he's passed away since, but when he retired, he always just wanted to run like a bar and grill type restaurant, just kind of in retirement to stay busy and do something. So he actually bought a place and opened it up, and it really just took off. And then when he passed away, his son kind of, I think as much as anything, keeps it on for a legacy. But they've obviously done really well with it. So they make awesome burgers and just kind of your diner style, lots of beers on tap, TVs and sports stuff everywhere. But they have a real loyal following of people that support them as people as much as anything, but also love the food and pass the word along. So I've always just tried to try the mom and pop shops, just because you kind of seen the impact it can have. And especially during COVID, like we were ordering from places, although, I figured the Chili's and those guys of the world were getting their due from just, loyalty to franchise and all that. So we really tried to kind of put our money into the local spots that were definitely hit hard because we saw it direct from them. So yeah, I'm always up for trying a restaurant.
Rusty Beagle has great community, loyal customers. It always comes back to that with you, Jason.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's always about the people and the experience around it for you when it comes to fandom, and it's like creating that space and creating that opportunity to connect. And I think that's really powerful. So last question, because I got you here live. I shipped you some ribs because I'm an amateur smoker in my spare time. Give me some feedback. Would you recommend, right? Like, let's do the NPS question, 0 to 10. How likely would you be to recommend my shipped ribs to you?
Yeah, I think they were good. I think the only thing they struggle, I think the shipping's hard with meat. So I think especially with ribs, like ribs to me, like the juiciness, like I make a mess out of myself if I eat ribs. And I think they kind of, over the shipping time, it kind of just naturally is going to dry out from the ice and the packing a little bit. So, I think I used your instructions and got them moistened back up a little bit, but I think it's hard to beat that coming right off of a pit. I mean, ribs and getting them falling apart on the pit even sometimes when you cook and you're just grabbing the meat directly with whatever tools you have onto a plate. So yeah, no, I thought flavor wise they were great. I think they dried a little bit just from the shipping time, but like you mentioned, you were new to shipping them and trying them out. I think I even sent you one that ships out of here a lot, which I haven't had them shipped, so they may or may not be great either shipped. But I, just from if you want to see how these guys that ship all the time do it too, just for compare and contrast. So, but yeah, no, I thought flavor wise they're really good. So you can definitely tell. I bet if I'd had them right off the pit, I would have been licking my fingers for a few hours. So, the taste was great.
I mean, it's awesome feedback, right? Because a part of the experience when you ship them is, can you get them to a place where they're going to ship and then they're going to show up correctly? And so,
right,
it's good.
Yeah, ribs are tough.
You didn't want to like give me a score, but I think I'm hearing more like a 6 or 7. It's definitely not a 9 or a 10 yet.
I was gonna say, yeah, I was gonna say 7 on the number. So we'll go 7 here.
I got work to do on the shipping, and that's definitely great feedback. It's awesome. But mostly I'm just super satisfied that I managed to ship some ribs to my friend Jason in Texas and had good flavor, because that's a high bar, man. It's a super high bar.
Yeah, I look forward to it. We'll have to do some back and forth. Meat shipping over the coming months for sure.
100%. Well, I want to say thank you so much, Jason, for joining us. Where can people find you and connect with you if they wanted to follow up or learn more?
Yeah, I'd say, I don't have too much of a social media presence. I'm on LinkedIn, obviously, as myself, but I leave the Facebooking and that of the world to my wife. I don't need any social conflict in my life, so I leave that for the family and all that. So yeah, LinkedIn is really about the only place I'm out there on the web to find. So yeah, happy to join up and connect with anyone that's interested there.
Awesome. So Jason, thanks for joining us, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in, downloading this. I want to appreciate all of you who are listening, and we are going to attach some of the links So the Rusty Beagle is one of the places I heard about, and some of the information maybe about UT Austin and the Longhorns and their long tradition. And be sure to give us a rating and review at www.ratethispodcast.com/CLS. We're looking for feedback ourselves and continue to make this podcast valuable for everybody. Have a great day.